mid-80s, action games were becoming the industry's leading genre, with several releases that started new franchises that would live on for decades. Most of them involved laying on the lead until everyone who wasn't you was dead. Subtlety was not in a player's vocabulary. It was a formula that sold lots and lots of cartridges, providing little reason to change it, and it would take a brave visionary to break the mold. "23-year-old Hideo Kojima joined the MSX division of Konami in 1986. With his limited knowledge of programming, he was not the most adept employee. Kojima assistant-directed Penguin Adventure, the rousing sequel to 1983's Antarctic Adventure. He also wrote and directed an action platformer he dubbed Lost World, a title that combined the words war and world. Like many of Hideo's early ideas, World was tossed out by his superiors. Kojima's last chance to save his job was a war-inspired shoot-'em-up for the MSX2, the same computer line that introduced Konami's Bomberman in 1983. His pitch was initially hard for Konami executives to get excited about. Instead of having gamers charge forward, guns blazing, the game would encourage them to hide. It felt backwards, but Konami gambled on Kojima's vision and released Metal Gear on July 12, 1987. With just bare knuckles and a pack of smokes, players had to guide Foxhound Special Ops soldier Solid Snake through a heavily guarded installation called Outer Heaven, located 200 kilometers north of the fictional South African country of Galsburg. Snake's memorable visage on the game's box art was referenced directly from publicity photos of actor Michael Biehn in James Cameron's Terminator. Snake's mission was named Operation Intrude N313, following N312, an earlier botched attempt to infiltrate the compound by an operative known as Gray Fox. Gray's last communication contained only 2 words: Metal Gear. Taking commands from an officer called Big Boss, Snake had to break in, rescue Fox and other hostages, and uncover Outer Heaven's secret project. Sneaking or shooting past screen after screen, Snake could retrieve 7 weapons and 16 pieces of equipment, along with 8 levels of security pass cards. Items could help Snake breathe underwater, light up dark places, disguise himself as the enemy, hunt for landmines, or spy on adjacent screens. Some items magically regenerated after leaving the room, allowing Snake to keep coming and going if his stock needed replenishing. Unfortunately, the guards regenerated as well. If players navigated outside of an insurgent's direct line of sight, they could conserve ammunition. Gas-filled corridors, security cameras, breakaway traps, hidden doorways, electric floors, and infrared lasers also served as deterrents. And if an alarm was triggered, the base's defenses would rush the area. 1 exclamation mark above a guard's head meant you could slip away to safety on another screen, but if they flashed 2, you had to escape to another floor or clear the opposition. Bosses, on the other hand, like Shotmaker, Machine Gun Kid, Fire Trooper, and Dirty Duck, were unavoidable adversaries. Hostages relayed tips and useful intel once you untied them, and releasing 5 boosted your rank or class, increasing your maximum health and allowing you to carry more ammo. Discovering Gray Fox gave Snake his real objective: stopping Metal Gear. The walking tank was capable of launching a nuclear assault from any position on the planet, and it was moments away from becoming operational. The weapon's creator, Dr. Drago Petrovich Modnar, was also being held against his will, along with his daughter, Ellen. She was kidnapped to force the robotics engineer to build the bipedal mech. Unable to reach Metal Gear's hangar by himself, Snake received assistance via his radio transceiver by resistance fighters named Diane, Jennifer, and Schneider. They could be contacted, along with CO Big Boss, on a specific frequency that some characters changed in the course of the mission. Big Boss warned you of incoming hazards, Diane presented strategies for different bosses, Jennifer pointed you towards key items, and Schneider almost revealed the identity of Outer Heaven's leader before being cut off. Against all odds, Snake survived to face off against Metal Gear, using a strategy suggested by Dr. Petrovich. The tank's destruction began the base's self-destruct sequence, but the exit was blocked. Unmasking himself as the mastermind behind Outer Heaven, Big Boss appeared in person and confronted Snake. The boss planned to use Snake to keep US officials misinformed, in hopes the rookie would quickly fall into enemy hands. After a few strategically placed rockets, Snake proved he was up to the task. As the clock ticked down, the seemingly innocuous pack of cigarettes could be smoked to buy the player more time. Big Boss was beaten, Metal Gear was disabled, and Outer Heaven went up in smoke as Snake escaped on foot. Metal Gear on MSX2 garnered glowing reviews and a loyal following in Japan and Europe, and created the stealth genre as it's known today. This warm reception permitted it to be adjusted for American audiences on the Nintendo Entertainment System. The port, which launched in Japan 5 months later and in the US in June of '88, was not overseen by Kojima, and as a result, several revisions were made. On the MSX, Snake snuck into Outer Heaven grounds through an underwater passage, but on the NES, he dropped in via parachute. It appeared Snake was deployed with 3 other soldiers, but he never reunited with them while on the ground. These alternate insertion points altered the initial buildings and outdoor areas. The standoff with the Hind D helicopter was removed and twin turret gunners were put in its place. Enemy alarms could always be silenced by moving to the next screen. The rooftop flying army no longer hovered, Snake's mug was removed from the transceiver screens, and while Big Boss's post-credit transmission on the MSX2 proved he survived the destruction of Outer Heaven, he was presumed dead on the NES. The climactic battle with Metal Gear was also stripped away, instead forcing Snake to bomb a supercomputer that controlled the mega weapon's functions. Kojima was not pleased with the NES version of Metal Gear, stating that the game was too challenging for the wrong reasons. English-speaking gamers also cited numerous spelling snafus, 2 occurring within minutes of starting up the game. Broken grammar and developer concerns had no effect on sales, however, as Metal Gear sold over 1 million copies in North America. The game was again reconfigured for the PC and Commodore 64 in 1990, mobile phones in 2004, the GameCube for the Japanese version of Twin Snakes the same year, and the PS2 for Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence in 2005. Kojima's sneaky idea was a hit on both coasts, but the NES won the popularity contest. Ultra Games, the same publisher responsible for Skate or Die and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, got the go-ahead to create an NES-exclusive sequel to Metal Gear. Having never thought of a sequel to his breakout game, Hideo Kojima was again not involved in the development process. Snake not only came back in 1990, he sought revenge. Snake's Revenge arrived in April and took place 3 years after the incursion of Outer Heaven. A hostile nation that was never disclosed had apparently received the plans for Metal Gear and was mass-producing the WMDs. Operation 747 sent Snake, along with operatives John Turner and Nick Meyer, to again destroy all traces of the secret project. Without Big Boss to back him up, Snake stayed in contact with an unnamed helicopter pilot and returning double agent Jennifer. Snake's transceiver was simplified from the manual frequency input method of the first game. Each contact's face appeared for the first time on the dialogue screen, and the limited list of associates was easily selectable. The radio also had a functioning radar that detected an ally's transmission, but the feature was only required a few times during the course of the mission. Snake ditched his green camouflage for a bright orange jumpsuit. It contrasted just about every environment he explored, making it a questionable fashion choice. But the Foxhound soldier did have an edge the second time around by starting the mission equipped with a pistol and a knife for close-range, one-hit kills. The newly added power armor bulked Snake up for moving heavy objects, and truth gas allowed Snake to question officers for vital hints. Doing so advanced his rank, along with rescuing hostages like before. The shotgun and flare gun were added to the arsenal, but the gas mask, cardboard box, and life-saving cigarettes were removed from Snake's equipment. The most glaring change in gameplay was the inclusion of underground, side-scrolling levels, similar to the view the original game had when using an elevator. These gave Snake the ability to duck and crawl, but most fans wished they hadn't been included. Given that the draw of Metal Gear was finding ways to avoid confrontation, these areas didn't fit the franchise because they forced you to take out every soldier in your path. While the game was riddled with these frustrating interludes, the sequel's environmental diversity was a clear improvement. The road to Metal Gear 2 cut through a forest, a cargo ship, a moving train, a desert base, military buildings connected by a trolley, and a fortified castle. The ready and waiting bosses included a scrimmage line of armored football players, a trio of grenadiers, a bridge-defending tank, and your supposed comrade, John. Snake decommissioned Turner the Spy and discovered Nick dying from fatal wounds. Nick revealed that not only was Jennifer a spy as well, but the entire plan was hatched by the very much alive Big Boss. Kept alive by a cyborg skeletal structure that was oddly bigger than his fleshy exterior, Snake's former CO had to be lured away from the safety of his lair and barraged with landmines that could damage Big Boss's only weak point, the bottom of his feet. Despite her traitorous actions, Snake rescued Jennifer, who pointed him in the direction of Metal Gear 2. Cut off from the machine, Snake had to reroute guided missiles through an air duct, with the launch clock rapidly ticking down. 15 direct hits later, Metal Gear 2 was history, and so was Operation 747. John Turner was deemed MIA, and his record was erased from the Navy archives. Nick Myers was congratulated posthumously by being promoted 3 ranks. Snake's Revenge was, for all US gamers knew, the sequel to 1987's Metal Gear. It had more areas, more weapons, and was a longer operation overall. But even the crew working on it didn't consider it a true continuation of Kojima's groundbreaking work. They were just building on a great idea. In the late 80s, Kojima wrote and directed a cyberpunk adventure called Snatcher, and had put Metal Gear behind him when he bumped into a Snake's Revenge developer on a train in Tokyo. With the eager fans' encouragement, Kojima agreed to continue the series, and the very next day was working on Snake's official return. Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake debuted on the MSX2 on July 19, 1990. Hideo invented the Central Asia province of Zanzibar land to set the stage for Operation Intrude F-014. Snake had left Foxhound following N313, and after briefly working for the CIA, he retired into the Canadian wilderness. Foxhound's new leader, Roy Campbell, asked for Snake's assistance in rescuing a scientist pivotal to refueling the world's depleting energy resources. Target, Dr. Keo Marv, went missing after bioengineering a remarkable type of algae called oilix that made more gas for less green. With a stockpile of nuclear weapons, Marv's kidnappers held the entire world hostage. Snake's backup intel was provided by Campbell, survival trainer McDonnell Miller, mercenary strategist George Kassler, undercover CIA agent Holly White, Dr. Marv's bodyguard Natasha Markova, later changed to Gustava Hefner, and animal expert Josef Norden, who eventually became known as Johan Jacobsen. Each contact's face, along with Snake's, was shown during the transceiver conversations, making it easier to figure out who was talking. With twice the people to chat with, the dialogue options increased dramatically from the first official installment. Dr. Petrovich was added to the frequency call list after Snake learned he was again being held by Big Boss against his will, and a mysterious messenger calling himself Snake's #1 fan also offered advice. Sneaking around was much more challenging, as guards gained a 45-degree field of vision and the ability to turn their heads sideways or diagonally. Their patterns weren't limited to a single screen, and they would curiously follow intentional and unintentional noises made by the player. A second alert phase was added in between the original attack and patrol modes that meant even if Snake cleared the first rush of guards, the remaining forces would still be aware of his presence. Snake could still outsmart them by crawling through certain areas like fences, tanks, desks, and air ducts. A 3x3 grid on the right showed adjacent screen enemy locations, as well as mines once the detector was activated. Anyone who threw away the instruction manual felt a pang of regret when they discovered it could decipher tap codes and supply an additional frequency number. Rescuing hostages no longer increased rank. Instead, Snake would get more health and ammo capacity after defeating each boss. The numerous celebrity adversaries that surfaced in Zanzibar land had many of their names changed in subsequent translations. Black Color, who was incorrectly named after the Timothy Zahn novel Black Collar, was switched to Black Ninja. Ultra Vox, referencing the British band Ultra Vox, became the Four Horsemen, and the Predator, alluding to the Arnold Schwarzenegger film, is now known as Jungle Evil. The bosses Red Blaster and Running Man both still go by their original monikers. Black Color, or Ninja, turned out to be Schneider from the first Metal Gear, and now had a first name, Kyle. After being captured, tortured, drugged, and run through a secret NASA project, Kyle joined the organization he originally opposed. Drago Modnar also switched sides, joining the Metal Gear project willingly. After you discovered Dr. Marv had succumbed to extensive torture, Petrovich attacked, and Snake had to put him down. But the biggest betrayal occurred when Snake's #1 fan turned out to be Gray Fox, now piloting a souped-up Metal Gear D. Fox killed Gustava, and after retrieving the Oilix formula, Snake was forced to confront his old friend, buckled inside of his old nemesis. Destroying Metal Gear D caught Snake's supplies on fire, and he was left with only his 2 fists and martial arts experience to defeat Gray Fox in the middle of a live minefield. With Fox immobilized and Metal Gear D demolished, Big Boss challenged an unarmed Solid Snake. Snake proved once again that all you need to save the world is a pack of cigarettes and a lighter by fashioning a flamethrower with an aerosol can and torching Big Boss, this time for good. Holly delivered the Oilix formula to Roy Campbell, and Snake vanished into the wild for a second time. Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake usurped Snake's Revenge as the definitive follow-up to the MSX NES original, despite the game only being released in Japan. It was eventually ported to mobile phones in 2004 and finally landed stateside in 2006 as a part of Metal Gear Solid 3's subsistence. The character names were changed to their current versions, frequency numbers were saved in a memory window, and other adjustments were made to reflect the changes the series had undergone in the 16 years since MG2's original release. Whatever version gamers ended up playing, it was clear they were experiencing something different. Metal Gear proved the games didn't have to be rushed, and that level of patience was something fans would have to get used to in the sequels to follow. Join us next week as Metal Gear goes underground, only to resurface as one of the industry's most solid franchises.
Metal Gear まさか
Leaving Zanzibar land for the outer reaches of space, Hideo Kojima wrote and directed the graphic adventure Policenauts in 1994. Advancing the point-and-click futuristic model he introduced in Snatcher, the game was originally released for the PC-98 and was quickly ported to the 3DO. While working on Panasonic's CD-based console, Kojima kept hearing incredible things about the brand new PlayStation. When he finally experienced the system's potential for himself, he went on high alert. In 1995, Kojima began developing a sequel to a series he hadn't touched in 5 years. Konami created their Computer Entertainment Japan division solely to supervise the project. The debugger for Policenauts, Yoji Shinkawa, designed the characters. This was a first for both Yoji and Solid Snake. Snake's first close-up on the MSX differed greatly from his two profiles in Metal Gear 2 based on actors Mel Gibson and Michael Madsen. Shinkawa regurgitated his own concept that removed the G.I. Joe Snake in favor of a darker, less saturated approach. The new model was added to the earlier games when they were re-released. The first gameplay of Metal Gear Solid lit up the Georgia Dome at E3 in 1997, following a concept video the year before. Other hot games featured at the event were Banjo-Kazooie, Star Fox 64, GoldenEye, Ocarina of Time, Symphony of the Night, and Final Fantasy VII. The 2-minute, 37-second trailer showcased pre-rendered characters, stealth, gun, and hand-to-hand combat, along with a brand new theme composed by Tappy Iwase. It brought new and old gamers together in a throng of anticipation. Japan waited a year to get Metal Gear Solid on June 12, 1998. The United States had to hold out for another 4 months. Six years after Zanzibar land, in the strange, futuristic era of 2005, a new mission squashed Snake's plans of retirement by stuffing him in a submersible and firing him towards Shadow Moses Island. Southwest of Alaska's coastline, the base housing a nuclear disposal facility had recently been captured by rogue members of Snake and Campbell's former unit, Foxhound. The new group, composed of superhumans known as the Genome Army, threatened nuclear war and demanded the remains of Big Boss. After Foxhound's former leader, Liquid Snake, led his comrades to commit treason, Roy Campbell returned to service to command Solid Snake a second time. Campbell also brought on genetic scientist Naomi Hunter, radar and radio engineer Mei Ling, weapons analyst Natasha Romanenko, and old friend Master McDonnell Miller. Other than stopping the terrorist plot, Snake also had to rescue Kenneth Baker, president of the fictional weapons manufacturer ArmsTech, and Donald Anderson, chief of the non-fictional Defense Advanced Projects Agency, or DARPA, formed after the Soviets launched Sputnik in 1957. Anderson told Snake about Metal Gear Rex, the most recent incarnation of the dreaded mech. Recruiting additional help while on the inside, Snake sought assistance from a regretful programmer named Hal Emmerich. aka Otacon, who switched sides when evidence arose that he was working for the bad guys, and Roy Campbell's daughter, Meryl Silverberg, who was trapped in the cell next to Anderson. The camera in Metal Gear Solid stayed close to the perspective demonstrated in Kojima's first 2 games in the series. Environments were viewed from a top-down angle, allowing the player to see places Snake couldn't. The revolution this time around was a corner cam that activated when Snake stuck himself to a wall, and a first-person vantage when surveying a room, hiding underneath objects, or spying through binoculars. With no adjacent screens to escape to, getting caught was best avoided at all costs. Soldiers would keep pouring in until Snake found cover long enough for a timer to run down. The grid radar system Snake beta tested in Metal Gear 2 became the Soliton radar system designed by Mei Ling. The upgraded scanner covered an entire room, labeled cameras and soldiers as different colors, and displayed the target's field of vision. PS1 hardware helped Kojima unhinge the camera for cutscenes run on the in-game engine. The technology produced hours of widescreen action few thought the PlayStation 1 was capable of, and drew the player into a never-before-seen cinematic journey. Snake's arrival on Shadow Moses, which served as a mini-tutorial, continued the opening credits over the player-controlled gameplay, setting up the experience as an interactive movie. The credits also introduced Metal Gear Solid's voice cast, a first for the franchise. In Japan, Snake was voiced by Akio Otsuka, who also verbalized the characters of Judge Gabranth in Final Fantasy XII, Ansem in Kingdom Hearts, and Xehanort in Kingdom Hearts 2.
どこでその名を知った？昔から多少縁があってな。
In the US, Snake was portrayed by David Hayter, an actor and screenwriter who penned the scripts for X-Men, X2, The Scorpion King, and The Watchmen.
Well, I know I won't be bored for the next 18 hours.
Again, a clan of unskippable bosses with catchy call signs stood to best Solid Snake, each overly confident in their abilities. Revolver Ocelot introduced Snake to his cult Peacemaker, but soon after had his right hand severed by a surprise combatant. Psycho Mantis took control of Meryl and eerily crept past the fourth wall by rumbling your DualShock controller and hacking into prior saves on your memory card. The freak show ended when Snake knocked Meryl unconscious and used infrared goggles to find Mantis in his adaptive camouflage suit. Sniper Wolf, the first female adversary in a Metal Gear game, severely injured Meryl, causing Snake to hastily rush her and get captured. After returning to the battlefield, Snake caught Wolf in his sights and put her out of her misery despite the passionate cries of an infatuated Otacon. A tank holding Vulcan Raven took a shot at Snake early on, and after the armored vehicle was destroyed, Raven returned with a Gatling gun. The last member of Liquid's team was unknowingly eliminated before any of these battles took place, when Master Mimic Decoy Octopus, posing as Donald Anderson, suffered a mysterious heart attack. A cyborg ninja also appeared to wreak havoc on Shadow Moses, but neither side claimed responsibility for it. The operative dismembered Ocelot, sashimi'd a wave of genome soldiers, and fought Snake in front of Otacon. After a quick clash, Snake identified the cloaked assassin as Grey Fox, who presumably survived the incident at Zanzibar Land. He appeared to have no allegiance, but returned in the nick of time to turn the tide of the final battle.
Snake, have you ever heard of something called Fox Die?
Upon Master Miller's suggestion, Naomi Hunter was revealed as a spy. Prior to the mission, she injected Solid Snake with a manufactured virus called Fox Die, the biological weapon that killed Anderson and Baker after they had experienced prolonged exposure to its host. It was programmed to kill Snake as well. Further testing Snake's trust of others, Master Miller turned out to be Liquid Snake in disguise. Merrill had given Snake a PAL key to deactivate Metal Gear, but had ended up arming the nuclear device for launch. Liquid piloted the mobile launcher and seemed to be an unbeatable adversary when Gray Fox flipped in to even the odds. Ninja Fox disabled Metal Gear's radar, and Liquid exposed himself to visualize his target. Stamping Fox out like a bug, Metal Gear Rex turned to Solid Snake, who picked apart the monster with an assault of lock-on missiles. Liquid then stepped out of its burning carcass and squared off against Solid Snake, a wounded Merrill lying unconscious nearby.
You can't fight your genes, it's fate.
Liquid confessed to Snake that he was Solid's test tube brother, as both of them were attempts to clone Big Boss. Calling in for support, Snake was greeted by Secretary of Defense Jim Houseman, who had just arrested Roy Campbell and authorized a nuclear strike on Shadow Moses. After brawling with his chemical brother and proving himself the superior sibling, Snake and Merrill escaped through a tunnel in a jeep. With his heart still beating, Liquid pursued and amazingly gained the upper hand. Solid Snake was an easy target, but Foxdie confused the identical twins and crippled Liquid in the nick of time. Metal Gear Solid had two possible conclusions depending on whether you succumbed to Ocelot's torture or muscled through the pain. The alternate endings had you snowmobiling into the sunrise with either Otacon or Merrill. Campbell immediately called off the airstrike and officially declared that Solid Snake had been killed in action.
Live, Snake. That's all I can say to you.
Solid was the first Metal Gear game for many, but longtime fans that had played Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake noticed several remarkable similarities between the two games. So many, in fact, that some believe Solid to be a remake of the MSX2 sequel. Reoccurring themes included a rocket battle with a Hind D chopper, an ambush by 4 attackers in an elevator, making contact with a disguised female in the ladies' bathroom, changing an object's temperature to make it a functioning key, an unidentified fan of Snake contacting him via radio who eventually turns out to be Gray Fox, and an old ally disguised in armored ninja gear. Metal Gear Solid sold 350,000 copies in its first weekend, and over 6 million have been sold worldwide since its release. A few publications criticized its length and lack of difficulty, but it was tough for them to foresee the numerous copycat franchises the game would spawn, and since then, no best games list has ever excluded it. MGS received several perfect scores, the Excellence Award for Interactive Art at the Japanese Media Arts Festival in 1998, and is considered by many to be the greatest PlayStation action game in the console's history. Stealth fans wanted more of Kojima's duck-and-cover combat, and Konami rapidly dished out a massive content just over a year later. Metal Gear Solid Integral brought to Japanese players the content revised for the English port, along with the downloadable Pocket Station minigame and 300 VR missions, a continuation of training from the original. Three months later, the tactical puzzles were released in America as VR missions. The simulations ranged from murder mysteries to confrontations with Godzilla-sized genome soldiers to test driving the cyborg ninja exoskeleton. VR also came packed with trailers for MGS and a photo shoot mode starring the artificially coy Naomi Hunter and Mei Ling. Reviews questioned its release as a standalone game and recommended it only for hungry fans. Even though Metal Gear Solid was widely hailed as a groundbreaking achievement, Hideo Kojima and his team felt the need to remake the title in 2004. While having lunch with his greatest influence, Shigeru Miyamoto, the Zelda creator urged Kojima to make a Metal Gear game for the GameCube. That was all it took to get the project running. Developed by Silicon Knights, the Twin Snakes was first shown off at E3 2003 and touted itself as featuring the best story of the 20th century blended with the best gameplay of the 21st. In reality, the Twin Snakes was the original story with some gameplay enhancements found in Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty. Although Twin Snakes was created by Silicon Knights, its cutscenes were developed in-house at Konami and directed by Japanese film director Ryuhei Kitamura. Kitamura was widely known for his utilization of the bullet time effect, a trick excessively overdone since its breakthrough in the 1999 film The Matrix. Originally, Kitamura's vision was simply to stick as close to the original cinematics as possible, but when Kojima was shown the cuts, he rejected them and demanded they be redone to be more original. The end result was something to behold. Nearly every flaw was corrected, and the developers went above and beyond, pouring on the fan service. Prominent features, such as the ability to use first-person aiming, holding up enemies at gunpoint for dog tags, and the ability to hang over ledges and drop down to lower levels, were plucked from Metal Gear Solid 2. Other smaller refinements included adding first-person effects, such as the camera freezing over in cold exteriors, guards now calling for backup when Snake was spotted, being able to shoot out surveillance cameras with a gun, and not having to switch to a keycard when Snake needed to open a locked door. The creators also made sure to sprinkle in plenty of Easter eggs for returning soldiers. Instead of Mantis scanning a PlayStation memory card, he read the GameCube card and listed off several titles from the save data, including Super Smash Bros. Melee, Super Mario Sunshine, The Wind Waker, and Eternal Darkness. In the room where Snake rescues Otacon, several pieces of eye candy were thrown in, such as a Mario and Yoshi doll that had accompanying sound effects when shot, as well as a functional GameCube and Wavebird at one of the desks. Some of the magazines that could be used to distract the guards feature the main protagonist of Eternal Darkness, Alex Roivas. Of course, not all changes were for the best. None of the sample VR missions were included. During the battle with Gray Fox, there originally was a sequence that involved shooting the ninja to finish him off. In the Metal Gear Rex battle, missiles had the ability to lock onto Snake in the original, which was changed to make the fight a bit easier. Players who were new to the series could start off on the newly added very easy difficulty setting, and veterans who did not wish to endure the rather lengthy codec sessions could now quickly skip through them. Finally, almost all of the original score was rewritten, with the exception of the ending theme. The best is yet to come. Much of the dialogue was re-recorded for Twin Snakes, usually in a more dramatic and over-the-top approach, even by Metal Gear standards.
I'm just the leftovers of what they used to make you.
Gray Fox, as well as the DARPA chief Anderson, was originally voiced by Greg Eagles, but Rob Paulson took over in the GameCube version. Though this was the only cast member change, the voices of May, Naomi, and Natasha were altered to remove their accents. Some of the content was also updated to reflect the times, such as the ending statistics being accurate as of the year 2003 versus 1998. Reviews went both ways, with the negative comments comparing the features in Twin Snakes to those of the GameCube Resident Evil remake 2 years earlier. A radio drama of Metal Gear Solid ran for 18 episodes from 1998 to 1999 on Konami's radio channel called Club DB. While not attributed to canon, the series covered events following the incident on Shadow Moses Island by continuing the anti-terrorist exploits of Snake, Campbell, Merrill, and Mei Ling. MGS was also re-released with its sequels as a part of the Essential Collection in March of 2008. The impact of Metal Gear Solid is still being felt to this day, with its drastic advancements in voice acting, cutscenes, plot twists, stealth movement, inventive interactivity, and blockbuster action. Hideo Kojima had many achievements to be proud of, but his only PlayStation 1 project became the masterpiece that would fortify his persona as a video game auteur. Snake was dreaming of a third retirement, but Kojima was just getting started. Reprogram this frequency number next week as Metal Gear Solid 2 infiltrates the PlayStation 2. In this new generation, the rules of engagement change. Beloved heroes retreat into the shadows, and a military family is formed.
Destroy the final weapon.
The sequel to Metal Gear Solid began development before the original title reached the US. Kojima and his team started pre-planning for the introductory portion of MGS2, and internal videos circulated at Konami in the months immediately following. At the same time, Sony was busy polishing the PlayStation 2, and it was decided Snake's new mission would be launched on the updated console. Initially, concept work depicted characters using the now famous toon rendering technique, though in the end, the developers opted for a more realistic visual style. Finally, at E3 2000, the world got its first glimpse at the fourth official installment in the Solid franchise, Sons of Liberty. The nearly 8-minute-long trailer not only showcased hints of new gameplay footage as well as early details of the plot, but kickstarted a year-long hype frenzy. Trailer after trailer revealed more and more of the story and gameplay, and fans couldn't wait until the title's anticipated release sometime in the fall of 2001. To help ease the wait, a demo version of Sons of Liberty was included with another Kojima title, Zone of the Enders, when it was released in March. The demo contained just the beginning portion of the game. More trailers were shown at E3 and TGS, but Kojima tormented fans by submerging in the time leading up to the release, claiming no new info would surface until the game was about to come out. Sons of Liberty finally arrived in North America on November 14, 2001, the very same day as the launch of the Xbox. It surfaced 2 weeks later in Japan. Sons of Liberty took place in 2007, 2 years after the events of Shadow Moses. Snake, now teaming up with pal Otacon, joined the NGO group Philanthropy, an organization with an anti-Metal Gear initiative. After receiving an apparent tip from his long-lost sister Emma, Otacon learned that the Marine Corps' new Metal Gear Ray was being transported aboard the vessel Discovery, traveling along the Hudson River. Snake, using amazing aerobatics and a leap of faith off the George Washington Bridge, infiltrated the passing tanker. Soon after scoping the immediate area, a team of Russian soldiers carried by Kasatka, the Russian Kamov Ka-60, took control of the ship. sealing off the cargo hold with Metal Gear Ray and rigging the craft with explosives. The invading force was led by General Sergei Gurlukovich, the same Russian general that intended to purchase Metal Gear Rex from Liquid in MGS1. Snake encountered Sergei's daughter, Olga, and the two engaged in a quick shootout. Snake knocked her out and moved below deck to the cargo holds where a horde of Marines and Ray stood waiting. Snake's objective was to photograph Ray and prove the Marines were involved. After snapping a few pics and uploading them to Otacon, Revolver Ocelot and Sergei captured the Commandant of the Marine Corps, Scott Dolph. Ocelot revealed that he had no intention of giving Ray to Gurlukovich, and the quick-draw specialist wiped them all out. Before Ocelot could escape, Snake confronted him, prompting a peculiar reaction from Ocelot's right arm. Seeking an amputee donor, Ocelot had surgically attached Liquid's appendage to his old wound, and it apparently possessed the ability to overtake Ocelot's mind. Ocelot blew the Discovery sky high, escaping with Ray. Snake was left behind with the sinking tanker and was presumed to be dead. Flashing forward 2 years, players were unexpectedly, and by many fans' accounts disappointingly, put in control of an operative known as Raiden. The brand new soldier's objective was to infiltrate the offshore cleanup facility Big Shell and rescue the President of the United States from a terrorist group known as Dead Cell. Raiden's support team consisted of former Foxhound Commander Colonel Roy Campbell, as well as Raiden's girlfriend, Rose. The terrorists demanded $30 billion and were being led by a man calling himself Solid Snake. As Raiden gradually made his way through the complex, he was quickly introduced to two members of Dead Cell. Vamp, with a taste for blood, superhuman speed and agility, and the ability to survive mortal wounds. And Fortune, the daughter of Scott Dolph, who apparently couldn't be hit by any weapon or attack. During the encounter with Vamp, Raiden met up with SEAL Lieutenant Junior Grade Iroquois Pliskin, who looked remarkably familiar. The pseudonym was a reference to the character that originally inspired Solid's name, Snake Plissken, from John Carpenter's Escape from New York. Pliskin and Raiden eventually teamed up with demolition expert Peter Stillman in order to defuse a series of explosives set up by Dead Cell member Fat Man, a former pupil of Stillman's. Though the team was successful in stopping the plot, the act triggered the countdown for the real bombs. Raiden stopped one of them, but Stillman failed and was killed.
I wanted to wield the power of a king instead of being an expendable pawn.
With the help of a third cyborg ninja named Mr. X and DIA operative Richard Ames, Raiden finally located President James Johnson. Johnson told Raiden that everything he knew about the mission, as well as the nation, was a sham. The president was a willful participant in the terrorist activities in hopes that he could bargain his way into becoming a member of the Patriots, an omnipresent organization that apparently ruled the United States of America. The leader of Dead Cell, another clone of Big Boss, known as Solidus Snake, was the former president during the events of Shadow Moses, George Sears.
By deleting such information, the Patriots can shape the course of history as they see fit.
The entire Big Shell facility was a ruse for the new Metal Gear project, Arsenal Gear. Raiden was instructed to give a disk containing a virus to Emma Emmerich and to end the president's life. Raiden refused, but Ocelot killed the president and let Raiden go free. Raiden successfully made it to Emma, but not before a fateful encounter with Dead Cell member Vamp. Emma was rushed to the entrance of Arsenal Gear and uploaded the virus before passing away in front of her brother. Pliskin, who had gradually been revealed as Solid Snake, asked Otacon to fly the hostages to safety. Raiden and Snake prepared to enter Arsenal Gear when Mr. X appeared and revealed herself to be Olga. Snake apparently switched sides, and Olga knocked Raiden unconscious. Raiden awoke in a chamber much like the one on Shadow Moses and planned an escape. While fleeing the compound, both Rose and the Colonel began to act strangely, with the Colonel asking Raiden to reset the game.
Honestly, though, you have played the game for a long time. Don't you have anything else to do with your time?
Eventually, Snake and Raiden were reunited, and Snake revealed he had to use Raiden to gain entry into Arsenal. The two moved forward and encountered Fortune. Snake stayed behind and allowed Raiden to move ahead, where he confronted Solidus and a horde of Metal Gear Ray units. Solidus was about to kill Raiden when Olga intervened and saved his life. She revealed her daughter was being held by the Patriots, and if Raiden died, so too would her child. Solidus killed Olga and ordered the Ray units to strike. Raiden dismantled the hordes of Rays, and eventually the virus Emma uploaded kicked in. Arsenal Gear was thrown into a state of chaos and began a crash course for New York City. Atop Arsenal Gear, Solidus and the members of Dead Cell held Snake and Raiden hostage. Just when Snake, Raiden, and the player seemed to have everything sorted out, Ocelot dropped the bomb that all that had occurred was the will of the Patriots. Shocked and in disbelief, Fortune attempted to kill Ocelot, only to feel his bullet strike her in the chest. Even her good luck was a gift from the Patriots, and the result of their technology. Ocelot, under the control of Liquid's arm, commandeered the last Metal Gear Ray and prepared to kill everyone else, but Fortune shielded the group from the attack. Liquid escaped with Ray, Solid gave chase, and Arsenal Gear crashed into Manhattan, throwing Solidus and Raiden atop the Federal Reserve Building. The two then fought an epic sword battle, ending in Raiden killing Solidus by sending him over the edge. Raiden then reunited with Rose and desired to track down the Patriots, but Snake felt Raiden needed to figure some things out before he could help the cause. Sons of Liberty contained the same essential gameplay made popular in MGS1, though several tweaks were added, as well as new features made possible by the power of the PlayStation 2. Players could now use their weapons in first-person mode, which was combined with the new system that allowed players to hold enemy units up at gunpoint. They could then wait to collect a hidden dog tag, knock them out, or grab them and use them as a human shield. Snake could no longer leave bodies lying around in the open, as other guards would see it and send in backup. If you let a knocked-out enemy regain consciousness, that unit would also call in for help. Backup troops would sweep the area in the new caution mode, and even hiding in a box sometimes would not suffice. When the player was outright spotted, units would work to cut off any escape routes and order additional forces, typically carrying protective shields and heavier firepower. Snake or Raiden would need to find a safe place to hide or take out the immediate soldiers in the area in order to exit the alert mode. The game would then enter caution mode, thus enforcing a higher penalty on players who were discovered and reinforcing the notion of stealth gameplay. At points, even Snake's shadow was detectable by enemy guards. The attention to detail was also second to none at the time, filled with tons of visual eye candy. Players could go into a full-service bar and shatter every single one of the glasses, each leaking their own unique contents. In a pantry shootout, watermelons would explode and bags of flour would pour onto the floor. The player could even shoot out a huge piece of glass in the early part of the tanker, bit by bit, until it shattered into thousands of pieces. There was nothing on par with switching out controller ports, but Sons of Liberty had its fair share of epic boss battles. In the shootout with Olga, players had to deal with not only the rain affecting their vision, but Olga could use a spotlight to blind Snake or loosen a tarp to provide cover. Of course, Snake could use his own weapons to counter these measures. Fat Man skated around the top of a helipad, planting explosives that had to be defused while still trying to take him out. Fortune was the only boss encounter that players could not overcome, requiring them to simply take cover and dodge her shots. Vamp danced across water and walls while displaying his fancy knife work. Instead of taking on a Hind-D helicopter, players had to eliminate a Harrier jet. Of course, Snake and Raiden had loads of firepower at their disposal to help them tackle each villain. MGS2 introduced the Tranquilizer Gun, allowing players to complete the entire game without forcefully killing a single person, along with a razor-sharp katana and coolant spray. Players could hang over ledges to avoid discovery, though they were limited by their grip gauge. The gauge could be leveled up by performing 100 pull-ups. Completing Sons of Liberty resulted in a statistical breakdown of your performance, as well as the assigning of a code name based on certain factors. While the original merely displayed such results, Sons of Liberty provided an additional code that players could input on the official MGS2 website to enter into a worldwide ranking system. The feature premiered in the trial build and drew an overwhelming reception. The rankings updated weekly until they were eventually taken offline. Another noteworthy element of Sons of Liberty was its soundtrack. The original featured an impressive score, but Kojima upped the ante by bringing on Harry Gregson Williams, who had worked on such titles as Shrek, Chicken Run, and The Replacement Killers, to compose much of the soundtrack for Sons of Liberty, along with Norihiko Hibino, who had worked previously on Metal Gear Ghost Babel. Rika Muranaka, who composed and arranged The Best Is Yet to Come, returned to provide the ending theme, Can't Say Goodbye to Yesterday. Unfortunately, the events of September 11th forced Kojima and Konami to make some tough decisions very close to the release of MGS2. Before its launch, it was known that Sons of Liberty took place in New York City and featured terrorist activities. A sequence depicting Arsenal Gear's displacement of the Statue of Liberty and crashing through half of Manhattan was taken out, as was a breaking newscast after the credits showing the Statue of Liberty's new resting place, Ellis Island. Additionally, American flags, which were supposed to be on all the flagpoles in New York, were removed, including the one Raiden was supposed to cut down to cover Solidus's dead body. Similar to the Integral package following Metal Gear Solid, Konami compiled an expanded collection that marked the debut of the franchise on Microsoft's console. Metal Gear Solid 2 Substance was released in 2002. It was initially an exclusive for the Xbox, with PlayStation 2 and PC users having to wait until March of the following year. However, only the PlayStation 2 version contained every single feature, including a skateboarding mode based on the Evolution skateboarding engine. Substance still featured the same single-player campaign with some minor changes. In addition to the solo operation, boss survival and casting theater modes were added, as well as nearly 500 standalone missions. While the majority of these were akin to the VR missions in the original title, some of the extras allowed players to take the reins of Snake or Raiden in various scenarios throughout the tanker and big shell areas. Completing these missions unlocked various alternate outfits. Perhaps the biggest bonus, however, was the inclusion of 5 plot-based storylines titled Snake Tales. The mode essentially amounted to another single-player campaign, with players taking control of Solid Snake in various alternate scenarios set in the world of Sons of Liberty. The stories ranged from rather mild tales like stopping an insurrection by Fat Man and helping Otacon's sister Emma thwart a drug cartel, to a diabolical boss battle between Snake and Meryl, and the wildly incomprehensible task of taking down a gigantic enemy soldier dubbed Gurlagon in order to stop Solidus from taking over alternate realities. Sadly, these missions lacked proper production value and opted to use text to advance the narrative rather than the traditional cutscenes with voice work. MGS2 enjoyed an immense following after its release and further expanded the popularity of the franchise. Kojima's team put together the document of Metal Gear Solid 2, a complete lexicon and making-of feature that showcased not only how the creators put together the title, but included raw footage, artwork, models, and documentation that gave players a deeper insight into the inner workings of the development process. Sons of Liberty was released to incredible hype and has sold over 7 million copies to date. Reception was mostly positive, though critics and fans alike voiced several complaints. The most prominent issue raised was that the majority of the game was played as the new character Raiden, instead of series icon Solid Snake. This was exacerbated by fans who realized that early trailers released for the game showed Snake playable in the Big Shell section. Another sore point was the length of the cutscenes and codec conversations, with some segments featuring only a few minutes of gameplay, sandwiched between upwards of an hour of story development. The plot of the game also became quite convoluted in the final segments, with extensive delving into conspiracy theories, artificial intelligence, and social control. Despite these gripes, Sons of Liberty remains one of the finest pieces of cinematic gaming on the PlayStation 2. The game took some serious risks on a new platform, and divulged a story that fans are still wrapping their heads around. It was also the first Metal Gear game to have a Hideo Kojima production displayed on the front cover, making the developer a household name to gamers worldwide. Turn back the clock next week as we retreat to the beginning of the conflict. He may have been the ultimate enemy, but Big Boss was also the original hero.
I am not taking out any Metal Gears.
Amidst the enormous success of Sons of Liberty, the criticisms about the story and alternate hero continued to haunt Kojima. The developer decided to take the next Metal Gear back to its roots. Kojima stated that Metal Gear Solid 3 would take place in the wilderness, a stark contrast with MGS 1 and 2. Previous games were primarily set indoors because current consoles were not powerful enough to portray a true jungle setting, with changing weather, a natural landscape, and roaming wildlife. As a result, the collision engine in previous installments could not be used, and a new one had to be built from scratch.
What a thrill.
At the Tokyo Game Show in 2003, Kojima introduced the world to the newest international incident in the Metal Gear Solid series, Snake Eater. The gameplay sequences surprised many, but the most shocking revelation was the time period. The trailer clearly identified a soldier named Snake as the hero, but it seemed to take place sometime before Metal Gear Solid. The title graphics and music had a very classic James Bond style to them, suggesting the title could be set in the 1960s or 70s. Speculation ran rampant over the following months, but Kojima put assumptions to rest at E3 2004, announcing the game would take place in 1964 during the Cold War. Metal Gear Solid 3 was released later that year on November 14, 2004 in North America, to significantly less fanfare than its predecessor. Snake Eater dropped in Japan a month later. At the heart of Snake Eater was the tale of how the legendary Big Boss earned his namesake, and served as the official chronological origin of the entire Metal Gear franchise. Set in the jungles of Russia in the thick of the nuclear standoff, MGS3 opened with Jack, aka Naked Snake, being sent on an extraction op, dubbed the Virtuous Mission, to rescue the Soviet scientist Nikolai Stepanovich Sokolov. Backup consisted of medical specialist Paramedic, Snake's former mentor, the Boss, and Fox Unit Commander, Major Tom. Everything went without a hitch until Snake and Sokolov crossed a bridge en route to the rendezvous point. The Boss confronted her old pupil and revealed her defection to the Soviet Union. She had joined forces with Colonel Volgin and reunited with her former comrades in the Cobra unit. Snake attempted to stop the Boss, but failed and was severely injured. Volgin recaptured Sokolov and used one of the two Davy Crockett nuclear devices given to him by the Boss as a decoy to cover their escape. One week later, Major Tom contacted a recovering Snake to inform him the Soviet Union was blaming the United States for the nuclear explosion, and the US government had to prove their innocence immediately or face a full-scale nuclear war. In response to this declaration, the 36th President Lyndon B. Johnson promised he would stop Volgin's regime, destroy the tank called Shagohod Volgin planned to use, and eliminate the Boss as a traitor. Given a second chance, Snake was ordered back to the jungles of Russia to complete Operation Snake Eater. The Fox unit reunited, this time manned by Major Zero, who swapped his codename after realizing Tom was not the name of the final tunnel used by Allied POWs in the movie The Great Escape, but rather one of the tunnels that collapsed. The Steve McQueen film was a reference to one of Kojima's earliest inspirations for the stealth action genre. Paramedic and the technology expert Sigint also signed up. Snake returned to the facility where he rescued Sokolov in order to meet with a double agent codenamed Adam, but instead was greeted by ex-NSA operative Eva. Their meeting was cut short by a young Revolver Ocelot. The brazen gunfighter and his elite unit proved no match for Snake as he cleared the targets and knocked Ocelot out cold. Sadistic players could murder the defenseless Ocelot, but it created a paradox and resulted in a game over. Typically, Metal Gear games took place in closed-off spaces within industrial complexes with narrow corridors and small enclosures. Snake Eater opted for a more natural setting, replacing pylons with climbable trees and metal hallways with steep canyons. Though the Sons of Liberty mechanics remained largely intact, the new environment forced players to change pace and consider more options before progressing forward. Kojima utilized a camouflage system in Snake Eater, giving players an initial wardrobe to select various outfits from. A meter in the corner of the screen displayed a percentage that measured Snake's camouflage level. The closer to 100%, the better Snake blended into the background. Instead of just keeping an eye on his life meter, Snake had to maintain stamina as well. When it depleted, his performance would drop. Players had to use the local wildlife such as alligators, rats, and even birds for nourishment. These items could be stored, though some would spoil if they sat in the inventory too long. Snake's supplies had to be traded for spaces in his backpack, with some contained in storage and others available for immediate use. Snake Eater also introduced the now famous CQC gameplay. Close quarters combat allowed players to lock up with enemies and perform various maneuvers, such as placing them into a chokehold, taking them down, or interrogating them at knife point. CQC could also be used to engage enemies offensively to disarm and defeat them. For the first time in the series, Snake sustained injuries to his body that would become worse over time if not properly treated. Using several medical tools, gamers could play doctor and treat Snake's ailments to prevent further damage. With the various members of Cobra all gunning to test their skills against the legendary Son of the Boss, further damage was inevitable. After a second shootout with Ocelot, Snake flung himself into a ravine. As he made his way through the watery caverns, he encountered Cobra's first stepping stone, the Pain. The Pain had the ability to control a swarm of hornets, forcing Snake to take cover underwater and surface at the opportune moment. In a small area enclosed by the jungle, Snake faced the Fear, a foe with an uncanny tongue and unnatural agility. The Fury, a cosmonaut pyromaniac outfitted with a spacesuit and jetpack, attempted to cremate Snake in a concrete shelter. Upon defeating each of these Cobra members, they would unexpectedly explode. Though most of these boss encounters were traditional in nature, two of them stood out as rather unique. Players had the option early on in Operation Snake Eater to assassinate the End, known as the Father of Sniping, from afar. However, if they allowed him to be wheeled away, he would later appear in an open environment for a sniper's duel. Winning the standoff meant enduring the real conditions that snipers face, unless you took advantage of Kojima's sense of humor. The End was extremely old, and if the player saved and waited a week, or sped up the internal clock of the PS2, they would resume the battle to find the End had died of old age. In the encounter with the Sorrow, the boss's old war buddy, players had to play defense like the Fortune fight in Sons of Liberty. Snake traversed upstream while dodging the spirits of the enemies and bosses he had killed in the game so far, as well as attacks from the Sorrow himself. Upon reaching the end of the path, Snake apparently died and the game ended. Fortunately, if Snake ingested the revive pill, he awoke and resumed his mission. Eventually, Snake made it to Volgan's military fortress, Groznyjgrad, with the help of Eva. Snake attempted to infiltrate the fortress to rescue Sokolov and was forced to pass himself off as Major Ivan Rydenovich Rykov, who bore a striking resemblance to the MGS2 protagonist. Volgan interrupted Snake's rescue attempt and used a rather unorthodox means to discover Snake was an imposter. In the ensuing sequence, Sokolov was apparently killed and Snake was tortured, resulting in inevitable and irreversible damage to his right eye. Lucky players who saved in the jail cell following and later resumed from that point were treated to a very unusual Easter egg. After loading the file, instead of being Snake, you became a nameless character in the middle of a strange warehouse. A horde of zombie-like creatures attacked, and players could engage in combat resembling Devil May Cry. The impromptu hero could perform a wide variety of moves and enter an overdrive state, which gave the swordsman animalistic traits. Eventually, the sequence ended as Snake awoke, passing it off as a nightmare. With the help of Eva, Snake escaped and moved on to the facility where Shagohod was stored. Snake planted a series of explosives to destroy the Shagohod, but Volgan prevented his escape. The two slugged it out, with Snake emerging victorious. The facility erupted in a massive explosion as Eva and Snake rode off. Unfortunately, both the Shagohod and Volgan survived, and a lengthy chase sequence ensued. After speedily crossing over the runway and bridge, Snake and Eva finally destroyed the Shagohod, along with Volgan. The two made their way to a nearby lake where a WIG, or Wing-in-Ground aircraft, sat waiting for them. Eva prepped the plane while Snake confronted his mentor for one final battle. She told Snake if he wanted to complete the mission, her death had to come by his hands. Players had to actually press the trigger button to finish her, even though the sequence was presented as a cutscene. Eva and Snake prepared for takeoff, but Ocelot attempted a final time to stop Snake by shield jetting onto the plane. In a tense sequence, the two engaged in Ocelot's version of Russian roulette, though afterwards it was revealed both guns were full of blanks. Ocelot deboarded, and Snake and Eva made it to Alaska, where Snake finally received some well-deserved R&R and TNA. Snake awoke to find Eva gone, with only a taped message left behind. The recording told Snake Eva was actually working for the Chinese government, and Big Boss's death was an intentional play to appease the Russians and prevent a nuclear holocaust. In Washington, D.C., Snake received a commendation from the president himself, and the title of Big Boss. Snake, disgruntled at what had transpired, left the celebration abruptly to visit an unmarked grave. Snake placed the boss's gun and some flowers upon the tombstone, one of thousands lined in the rows. Just like before, an enhanced version of Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater was released in the form of Subsistence. The PS2 exclusive launched on December 22, 2005 in Japan, with the release in North America the following March. Unlike Integral and Substance, Subsistence ditched the typical VR and side missions in favor of other bonuses. Players could now play the updated versions of the MSX Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, engage in the series' first online mode, and use a full 3D camera throughout the main campaign. The online multiplayer component, appropriately titled Metal Gear Online, featured 5 modes with up to 8 players going head-to-head in various deathmatch and capture-the-flag-style skirmishes. Players who obtained the highest score in a match when certain settings were in place took the role of a main character from the game, as well as a cameo by Riko Hinamoto from Rumble Roses. Konami's Metal Gear Online service for the PlayStation 2 closed in Japan on December 26, 2006, and in North America on April 2, 2007. Subsistence also included a unique minigame known as Snake vs. Monkey. Snake had to venture through various stages on a dangerous primate hunt based on Sony's Ape Escape series. The popular secret theater movies were also included, such as Metal Gear S, which provided an alternate take on Snake Eater with Sigint as the lead hero, and Metal Gear Raiden Snake Eraser, a Terminator Back to the Future spoof throwing Raiden into various comical situations in an attempt to claim the lead role in Metal Gear Solid 4. Other humorous scenarios included Snake being forced to shake the hand of the CIA director he neglected at the end of the game, and Sokolov and Snake taking a peek at dirty magazines. A limited edition version of Subsistence was also released with a feature known as Existence, a feature film containing all of the game's cutscenes as well as additional footage. Those who pre-ordered Subsistence in North America also received Metal Gear Saga Volume 1, a documentary and 5-part 30-minute featurette about the entire Metal Gear series, interspersed with an interview of Hideo Kojima, as well as trailers for various current Metal Gear games. Snake Eater has sold nearly 4 million copies worldwide to date, a decidedly low number for the franchise. By Metal Gear Solid 3, a lot of the series' conventions, like the fixed camera, had begun to show their age. The addition of the food and camo systems were met with mixed reaction, and CQC was eventually found to be a little too effective. Despite these issues, MGS3 still received accolades. The theme track won the Best Original Pop Vocal Song from the Game Audio Network Guild at the Game Developers Conference in August 2005, while the game itself won the award for Best PS2 Game at 2005's Game Convention in Germany. David Hayter, the voice of Snake, was nominated for the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences Award for Outstanding Achievement in Character Performance. Kojima's decision to use Snake as the sole protagonist and curb the cinematic sequences went over well with fans. Metal Gear Solid 3 set forth the events that constructed Kojima's fantastical retelling of US military history. But the origin didn't end with Snake Eater. 2 years later, Kojima and Masahiro Yamamoto picked up the trail of Naked Snake 6 years after Volgan's uprising had been put down, in portable ops for the PSP. The new Big Boss retired from the Fox unit immediately following the operation that took his eye, and was soon captured by current Fox member Cunningham. Imprisoned somewhere on the San Hieronymo Peninsula in Colombia, Big Boss was quickly contacted by a nearby cellmate named Roy Campbell. Campbell was a part of a Green Beret unit sent in to stop the insurrection at the silo base there. The two broke out and began investigating. Big Boss first tried to make contact with Major Zero, but was received by Paramedic and SIGINT. Apparently, the US government believed Major Zero and Big Boss were responsible for the silo revolt, and the only way to clear their names was to capture the rebellion's leader, Gene, and bring him back to the US. Gene possessed a voice that could control the minds of those around him. Campbell and Big Boss decided they needed more manpower and recruited disgruntled resistance members to their side. Enlisting new officers brought them in contact with a young girl named Elisa, a test subject named Null, who was dubbed the Perfect Soldier, Sokolov, who was assisting Gene under the pseudonym Ghost, and Fox unit member Python, who had a history with Big Boss. Python was previously in an accident that resulted in the gift of chilling powers, with the side effect being that he had to be kept in very cold temperatures. Big Boss learned Cunningham was working for the Pentagon and wanted Gene to launch a nuke at Russia to prolong the Cold War. Gene was actually aware of this plan thanks to information from Ocelot and wanted to attack America instead. Gene then used his voice to summon Ursula, Elisa's split personality. Ursula possessed incredible psychic powers and used them to power up Metal Gear Roxa. Big Boss then destroyed Metal Gear, apparently killing Elisa. Big Boss continued on, engaging both Null and Cunningham himself. Null was unmasked as a teenager named Frank Yeager, who was with Boss in Mozambique in 1966, 2 years after Snake Eater. Yeager would eventually become Gray Fox. In the final confrontation with Gene, he prepped a rocket to launch the real Metal Gear unit at the United States. Elisa heroically confronted him but lacked the strength to win the fight. With her dying breath, Elisa foretold just about every event that would transpire, and has, from Metal Gear on, although no specific content about MGS4 was divulged. Elisa died, Gene was beaten, and the boss and his comrades averted the deployment of Metal Gear. Big Boss returned to the US and formed Foxhound. As the first canon entry on a handheld platform, Portable Ops gave fans an unexpected insight into the all-encompassing conspiracy. Despite its importance to the overall picture, its sales were ultimately disappointing. Even so, it was an important entry into the series, as it brought the early chapters of Jack, aka Naked Snake, aka Big Boss, to a ceremonious close, and made the boss's reversal at the end of the MSX Metal Gear even more conflicting than it originally appeared. We cut the cord in the next installment of the Retrospective, as Snake hits the road with 3 handheld campaigns that brought tactical espionage to players on the go. Snake stowed away to the series' first portable iteration in 2000's Metal Gear Solid Ghost Babel. The story wasn't canon, but the action was. Losing the Solid moniker in Japan, Ghost Babel sat as a what-if scenario, supposing an alternative future that took place after the first Metal Gear. It was directed by Shinta Nojiri, who went on to do the Acid series and contributed to Sons of Liberty and Snake Eater. Kojima was still credited for planning and story, but his efforts were focused on Sons of Liberty during Babel's production. Seven years after Outer Heaven was destroyed, Snake was once again called upon by Roy Campbell. Led by General Augustine Egwaban, the fictional country of Gindra in Central Africa had gotten its hands on Metal Gear technology while enveloped in civil war. As the leader of the GLF, the Gindra Liberation Front, they held up in what had been Outer Heaven just 7 years earlier. Intrigued, Snake came out of retirement, donned a parachute, and started sneaking. His adventure led him through forest and fortress, with information being fed to him via codec from Campbell, Weasel, a mercenary, Brian McBride, director of African Affairs for the CIA, and Mei Ling, the exemplary grad student who cast pearls of wisdom before Snake while saving his game. After some flirting with the codec, Snake found Sergeant Christine Jenner, the only surviving member of the Delta Force sent in before Snake, who was traveling incognito in a GLF uniform. Snake also met and rescued the portly James Jimmy the Wizard Harks, an imprisoned teenager who happened to be behind the construction of the new Metal Gear, Gander. Along the way, Snake battled more than the GLF. The General acquired the services of Black Chamber, a US Black Ops group that went rogue and made their mark as the bosses. Slasher Hawk was an Australian aborigine who threw boomerangs. The psychotic marionette owl attacked with 2 Bunraku puppets, knives, and darkness, forcing Snake to switch to night vision. Pyro Bison hunted Snake with his flamethrower 4 years before the Fury fight, before succumbing and setting himself ablaze. Their leader was Blackheart's Viper, a master of illusions and traps, who used the GLF situation to take revenge on Foxhound. Snake progressed and trampled Black Chamber villain by villain, culminating with the ultimate battle with Metal Gear. As the plot unraveled, friends became enemies and friends again, while others died. In a final battle with Viper, you discovered CIA liaison Brian McBride was actually the 5th member of Black Chamber, as Snake learned that Gindra and the Ghost Babel project were made to insurrect Pan-African unity, like Outer Heaven, another US government exercise that went rogue. With a third model of Metal Gear destroyed, Snake and Christine Jenner left to a happy ending. Ghost Babel was considered a portable masterpiece, garnering high accolades and top scores from multi-platform publications and websites. It had managed to deliver a Metal Gear experience with the limited technology of the Game Boy Color, and incorporated many of the series' tropes, both old and new. Crawling, guided Nikita missiles, and the venerable cardboard boxes were there, as well as lengthy codec conversations. Babel was broken into levels instead of featuring a consistent world, but that made for better portable play, and there were no compromises in design. It also included over 100 VR missions to test your skills with weapons and stealth. Ghost Babel was rated E by the ESRB despite the foggers obviously being Snake's patented smokes, references to alcohol, and even some mild blasphemy. And of course, a ton of dead bodies, including a suicide. The Game Boy Advance premiered the following summer, but Snake would not be sighted on a handheld until E3 2004, when Kojima's team unveiled the first Metal Gear for the PlayStation Portable, Metal Gear Acid. The visuals were in line with the previous PlayStation 2 titles, but the gameplay was drastically different. Rather than a real-time stealth action experience, the creators shifted gear and opted for turn-based strategy that utilized cards for all actions. Director Shinta Nojiri went on record stating the decision to utilize card strategy rather than previous conventions was due to the PSP's characteristics. The developers wanted to give players something distinctive instead of just another MGS. Acid was released in Japan in December of 2004, with a stateside launch in March of 2005. Acid was an official Metal Gear title, but Kojima considered it a side story in its own universe. Taking place in 2016, a retired Solid Snake was called into action to break into the Lobito Physics and Chemistry Laboratory. Snake had to recover something known as Pythagoras in order to prevent a group of terrorists from blowing up a jumbo jet carrying Senator Hatch, as well as other civilians. Snake was aided by team members Roger McCoy and psychic Alice Hazel, as well as Taliko Friedman, a member of the FBI's hostage rescue team. As Snake progressed through the lab, he took on the forces of Lieutenant Leone, whose mercenary group was hired by an anti-government militia in the Maloney Republic. His partner Taliko turned out to be Le Clown, a famous assassin, and a mental doppelganger named Hans Davis began making inconvenient appearances. Snake reunited with the real Taliko, stopped Le Clown, and destroyed the real Pythagoras, a shiny new Metal Gear. Acid's gameplay worked much like a strategy RPG. Players moved Snake along a map with his options shown via square grids. Cards were used to perform all actions, even the ability to move. They enabled Snake to attack with guns, replenish his health, or deal status effects. Players still had to avoid detection, shoot out cameras, sneak up on guards and knock them out, crawl through passageways, hide behind objects, and hang on ledges. Cards in the deck would be used up until the deck reset, so picking the right card for the right occasion was crucial. Acid included unique special cards based on nearly every other title in the series, including Ghost Babel. Though Acid provided a unique twist on stealth, fans and critics were disappointed with the turn-based mechanics, which took already slow-paced gameplay and brought it to a crawl. The story was simple by Metal Gear standards with less cutscenes and a higher focus on gameplay. The developers also opted to use text conversations and forego any formal voice work. Despite the lukewarm reception, a sequel appeared a year later. Metal Gear Acid 2 arrived in Japan in December of 2005 and then in March of 2006 in the US. Though a direct sequel, the game's protagonist was actually a completely different Snake than the one featured in Acid. The new Snake was a clone of the original, created from cell samples taken from the Lobito Island incident. MGA2's story opened with Snake illegally flying into the United States. His group was arrested by an FBI SWAT team and forced into a covert operation by an agent named Dalton. Snake had to infiltrate a research facility operated by military arms dealer Saint Logic. In the early stages of the mission, an official with the Department of Defense named General Wiseman took control. Snake was forced to partner up with a woman named Venus, who was searching for the Lucinda file, a log of a horrible act called the Pralia Massacre Snake was responsible for. Snake and Venus discovered that the real impending danger was a nuclear launch by a new Metal Gear model. The two confronted Snake's creators and ended the threat. Though the gameplay remained largely the same as its predecessor, MGA2 differentiated itself by utilizing more aesthetic variations. Finally incorporating the toon shading technique experimented with during the development of Sons of Liberty, MGA2's graphics engine featured a far more vibrant, stylized look. Weapons used by the characters were displayed graphically while equipped. In the original, actions were final, but in the sequel, players could cancel their previous movement and take a different course of action. Items could now be picked up by simply running over them, and MGA2 boasted the inclusion of over 500 upgradable cards, more than twice the number of Acid 1. MGA2 was also released with a peripheral device known as the Solid Eye. The device was a folding cardboard box that went over the PSP that generated a pop-out 3D effect, much like Nintendo's Virtual Boy. Japanese players could watch cutscenes from Snake Eater in Solid Eye mode as well. The word acid stood for three things. It represented the complete departure from the previous Metal Gear games in terms of style, which is an analogy to acid's ability to dissolve metal. A reference to vecuronium bromide, the chemical used by Elsie and Francis to hijack the passengers in the original title. And an acronym for Active Command Intelligence Duel, a reference to the game's mixture of turn-based strategy with card-based gameplay. MGA2 was better received by critics, but many fans still shunned it since it was a spin-off from the main series. With the next portable installment, Kojima and his team decided to reflect what fans had become used to on home consoles. Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops became a surprisingly prominent piece of the main series chronology. One of the biggest additions to the MGS formula was the inclusion of the Comrade system, necessitated by the game's plot point that a post-Snake Eater Big Boss had to recruit members of the Silo insurrection to take on Gene's forces. During action sequences, Boss simply had to incapacitate an enemy and drag them back to a truck on site. The enemy unit was then captured and, pending a time limit, would join your team. Of course, not every unit was the same. The first recruit was named Jonathan. He specialized in rescue operations and thus could drag enemies back to the truck faster. Snake could capture technical units to work on the creation of new items, medical units to heal the team faster, delivery men to transport equipment on and off site, and combat units to aid in Snake's sneaking missions. Players assigned each available unit to various teams to optimize performance. The result was a more squad-based experience, with players able to change out 4 characters in any level at any time. Even if Snake fell on the battlefield, players could take up one of any remaining soldiers. Though the process of procuring weapons and new recruits on site could get tedious, if the squad had certain units in place, the trips could be expedited. It was also required at points for players to place units in a spy team to recover intelligence required to progress, as well as uncover other optional data. Portable Ops was a mission-based game, with operatives moving around a 2D map to travel to various hotspots. Once on location, certain objectives needed to be accomplished in order to move the main story. However, players could venture into any one of the areas again to explore or replenish supplies. One of the limitations of the title was that any one character could only carry 4 items, so inventory management was crucial. Portable Ops utilized some of the newer control mechanics, such as a full 3D camera, albeit one limited to a single analog nub, and a radar indicator that resembled the one from Guns of the Patriots. Wi-Fi-enabled multiplayer was also included, an expansion of Metal Gear Online. One unique element of the multiplayer was that you could recruit and trade soldiers with opponents. Also, it was possible for a player to permanently lose one of their recruits during an online match. Unlike every other entry in the MGS series, the cutscenes in Portable Ops were not rendered using the in-game engine. Instead, they were presented with a unique comic style featuring hand-drawn artwork by artist Ashley Wood. The style was previously utilized in Metal Gear Solid digital graphic novel, as well as the novel for MGS2. Separating itself from the other Portable titles, Ops included voice work during the cutscenes, though in-game sequences and conversations while viewing the map were strictly text-based.
Snake, I heard they gave you quite a welcome back home.
Campbell, you healing up all right?
Yep, nearly good as new.
Staying true to the Solid series, Portable Ops received an enhanced version as well. On July 17, 2007, Konami announced Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops Plus, a standalone expansion of the original game, focused on online play. Players could also take the reins of new characters like Raiden, Roy Campbell, and Old Snake. The story mode within Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops Plus was removed, and a new single-player mode called Infinity Mission was added, where the player had to go through randomly chosen maps looking for the advance point within the level. Some others required a special mission to be completed before it would appear. Data from Portable Ops could be transferred over, so players started with their entire team intact from the get-go. The marathon cinemas and precision gameplay of Metal Gear Solid may not be perfectly suited for the handheld experience, but Ghost Babel, Acid, and Portable Ops embraced the limitations and behaviors of the systems they appeared on, making portable Metal Gear as eccentric and unique as the rest of the games in the franchise. On the dawn of Guns of the Patriots, Game Trailers presents a look back at the entire history of Kojima's war, as our Metal Gear retrospective comes to a close. We'll stitch the 7 canon games into a web of intrigue, and salute the end of an American hero.
Game trailers.
Metal Gear has enjoyed a remarkably rich narrative, featuring incredibly complex stories within each individual game, meticulously interwoven into one massive arc. For a series that has spanned numerous main titles and as many spin-offs, Kojima and his scenario gurus somehow constructed one of the most memorable plots in the history of the industry. We've intentionally omitted crucial story points in this retrospective in the interest of reconstructing the most secretive events in the main Metal Gear series in a linear fashion, with the help of official documentation and in-game storytelling. We present the order of the games according to the timeline given by Hideo Kojima himself in both Metal Gear Solid Saga volumes, with all the titles not in the main series obviously excluded. While the true beginnings of the lore were birthed during the World War I time period, the Snake Saga officially started in 1964 and will end in 2014.
We possess enormous wealth, the most advanced technology, and overwhelming power, assets fitting of our great country.
After the First World War ended, the world's three superpowers, Russia, the United States, and China, formed a group known as the Philosophers, who pooled together their financial resources to ensure dominance in the years to come. However, sometime in the 1930s, the last founding member died, and their entire wealth was passed down to their successors. This bounty became known as the Philosopher's Legacy, the true source of conflict during the events of both Snake Eater and Portable Ops. The three powers behind the Philosophers fought amongst themselves following the end of World War II, and during the chaos, the legacy was hidden in various banks all around the world, with Colonel Volgin's father responsible for laundering it. Volgin illegally obtained the legacy, and the three superpowers struggled to relieve him of it. The events of Operation Snake Eater were primarily orchestrated by Revolver Ocelot, who took the codename Adam, and an unnamed person who was only described as the man with the same codename as Null at the end of Portable Ops. Born with the real name Adamska, Ocelot was actually the son of the Boss and the Sorrow. Also known as the Joy, the Boss was born in the 1920s. She was known as Voyevoda in Russia, which literally means warlord. During the Battle of Normandy in 1944, she led the Cobra unit to victory, but went into labor on the battlefield. In order to allow her child to survive the birth, she performed a cesarean section on herself that left her with a long, snaking scar across her abdomen. Thus, the man that would become known as Revolver Ocelot was born and raised by the Philosophers. During Snake Eater, Ocelot was a GRU major under Volgin and led his own unit in Spetsnaz, while also posing as an agent for the KGB. The ending of Metal Gear Solid 3 not only confirmed that the US had half of the legacy, but that the agent Eva didn't, after making off with fake microfilm. Ocelot also revealed to the director of the CIA that he had uncovered plans found in the office of Alexander Leonidovich Gronin. The documents were blueprints for Metal Gear D and Metal Gear Rex. When Naked Snake encountered the engineer while sneaking through Groznygrad, Gronin had threatened to leak these sensitive materials to a good friend of his in the United States, the grandfather of Hal Emmerich, in retaliation for Volgin selecting Sokolov over him.
To capitalism!
After murdering the boss and stopping Volgin, the newly christened Big Boss retired from the Fox unit, and Gene, codenamed Viper, took over leadership. In 1970, 6 years after the events of Snake Eater, Gene staged an uprising and took control of Metal Gear Russia, in hopes of using it to destroy the Philosophers in Portable Ops. Gene was a result of the Successor Project, the goal of which was to create the ultimate battlefield commander. Since the Boss was the model for these experiments, the relationship between Gene and Big Boss was not unlike that of Liquid and Solid Snake. At the end of the events of Portable Ops, Snake killed Gene, who then gave him the funds, equipment, personnel, and all other information regarding his dream called Army's Heaven.
Seems our insurance policy came in handy after all. He did quite well. It looks as if everything is going exactly the way you wanted it.
In the aftermath of Army's Heaven, Major Zero disbanded the Fox unit, Big Boss founded the Foxhound unit, and Ocelot assassinated the DCI in order to obtain all CI documentation on the philosophers. It was at this point that Ocelot called his unnamed contact about the proposal to create the Patriots, an organization that would rule America from behind the scenes. Ocelot's one condition was that they invite Big Boss to join them. Though not confirmed at this time, it was heavily implied that Big Boss was an original member of the Patriots. Little is known of the Patriots' exploits between 1970 and the events of Metal Gear Solid, but it can be assumed that they at least had a small hand in everything that transpired from then on.
We are on the verge of extinction. What?
After establishing Foxhound in 1971, along with Frank Yeager and Roy Campbell, Big Boss served in the Vietnam War, but was injured and went into a coma. While unconscious, a project known as Les Enfants Terribles, French for the terrible children, was carried out. Much like the successor project, the goal was to create soldiers in the perfect image of Big Boss himself. The offspring created from this project were David, aka Solid Snake, who received the recessive genes, Liquid Snake, who was granted the dominant genes, and Solidus Snake, a perfect blend of the two. After Big Boss recovered, he went back into action alongside his comrades. In 1975, Frank Yeager earned the title Fox, the highest honor for a member of Foxhound. Subsequently, Roy Campbell was given the codename Chicken Fox.
He was a young soldier when he picked me up near the Zambezi River.
Gray Fox, as he came to be known, went on to assume the alias Frank Hunter as a part of a mission in Rhodesia during its civil war in the early 1980s. It was during this time that Gray Fox murdered the parents of Naomi Hunter, but couldn't bring himself to kill the young girl as well. Remorseful, Gray Fox adopted Naomi, giving her the same last name of his new assumed alias. Big Boss and Gray Fox took Naomi to the United States and supported her there while they returned back to Africa.
Snake, this is McDonald Miller. It's been a long time.
During this same time period in the early 1980s, McDonald Miller joined Foxhound as the drill sergeant, earning him the title Master Miller, and Raiden, aka Jack, was born. Meryl Silverberg was also conceived and recognized as the daughter of Matt Campbell, but she was actually the biological daughter of Roy Campbell and the result of a scandalous affair. This information surfaced in the non-canon ending of Metal Gear Solid, so its validity was often considered suspect.
Be loyal to yourself.
Eventually, in 1988, Big Boss initiated preparations for Outer Heaven. At the same time, Solidus Snake was training Raiden as a young boy to master the art of war. Meanwhile, David and Liquid Snake began their military careers during the Persian Gulf War. David infiltrated Iraq as a member of the Green Berets, while Liquid fought with the British Special Force sent to destroy mobile Scud missile launchers. Finally, in 1994, David became a member of Foxhound and earned the title Snake, the second highest honor in the unit behind Fox. Big Boss designated his codename as Solid Snake, a moniker that stuck with him to this day. Snake's first widely publicized mission as a member of Foxhound took place 1 year later. Though initially Gray Fox's mission, known as Operation Intrude N312, Solid Snake was the soldier who finally stopped the forces of Outer Heaven as a part of N313. After blowing up Metal Gear, Solid Snake retired from Foxhound to the wilderness of Alaska. However, only 4 short years later, Snake was called back to handle the Zanzibar land disturbance. Demonstrating why he became known as the legendary soldier of our time, Snake defeated Frank Yeager, the man who was known as the Perfect Soldier. It was also revealed that Gustava Hefner was Gray Fox's old girlfriend, but whether Fox knew that before he killed her is a mystery. Big Boss's grand scheme was to use war orphans to create super soldiers, thus explaining all the little children running around the complex.
Who the hell are you? One of them?
You'll find out soon enough.
The events of Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake served as the springboard for the Metal Gear Solid franchise. Operation Intrude F014 set in motion several events that influenced the Solid titles. Upon learning of her brother's death, Naomi Hunter became hell-bent on exacting revenge upon Solid Snake, and aided her brother, who survived Zanzibar land after he escaped and killed his captor and Foxhound's medical chief, Dr. Clark. Clark had performed a series of tests on Gray Fox, encasing him in a cybernetic exoskeleton. Roy Campbell retired from Foxhound, and shortly after, Liquid joined up and became the field commander. George Sears was placed into the White House by the Patriots as the 43rd President of the United States.
They regulate the country's various interests through controlled presentation, staging a drama that is palatable to the general masses.
During his second term, Sears instigated the events of Shadow Moses in 2005, exposing the Genome Army and Metal Gear Rex to the public. He was removed from the presidency immediately thereafter, where he went into hiding and assumed the codename Solidus Snake. The popular Johnny Sasaki was introduced during Shadow Moses, and his gastroenteritic bloodline became a running gag in subsequent Metal Gear games. Liquid, before falling to Foxdie, dreamt of turning Shadow Moses into the next Outer Heaven, in order to not just continue Big Boss's dream, but to surpass him and prove he was the dominant son. However, Naomi Campbell, for some inexplicable reason, altered the makeup of the Foxdie virus, which killed Liquid in the end instead of Solid.
We've prepared a convincing cover story.
Jim Houseman, the Secretary of Defense, was also in league with George Sears and claimed Shadow Moses was orchestrated by him and him alone in order to obtain Metal Gear Rex's data, though this was likely a ploy to protect the president. Houseman was removed from duty by Richard Ames and allegedly killed himself. Ames's former wife, Nastasha Romanenko, who served as the nuclear specialist during the mission, wrote a book called In the Darkness of Shadow Moses, chronicling the complete recount of the events to prevent a cover-up. The sales from the book were used to start Philanthropy, the NGO that Snake and Otacon joined after Shadow Moses. They formed the group to eradicate all the Metal Gears after Revolver Ocelot leaked technical information on Metal Gear Rex to the world. What transpired next was chronicled in Metal Gear Solid Mobile. Otacon and Snake tracked down Metal Gear Ray's AI programmer, Dr. Victoria Reed, who promised to divulge all she knew in exchange for their assistance in her escape. Revolver Ocelot fled to France along with the arm of Liquid Snake, where he underwent a radical surgery. It wasn't just the arm that joined him, but Liquid's psyche, forming a symbiotic union later known as Liquid Ocelot. Manifesting periodically, Liquid claimed to have chosen Ocelot for the sole purpose of eliminating the last known Patriots. An obstinate Ocelot, who claimed to know full well of Liquid's intentions, fought to keep the lingering persona in check. But by the end of the events of Sons of Liberty, it had become clear that it was Ocelot himself that inevitably succumbed to the parasitic limb's influence. After the Discovery sunk and Ocelot fled with Ray, Otacon rescued Snake from the Hudson. The public, as well as the Patriots, believed Solid Snake had died, and to cement the fabrication, the duo stole Liquid's body and used it in place of Solid Snake's, since their DNA was identical. The Patriots decided to test out their new S3 project, which was developed during the Shadow Moses incident. A new member of Foxhound with the initial codename of Snake was sent to the offshore cleaning facility Big Shell for a simulated reenactment of Shadow Moses. Snake was actually Raiden, aka Jack, and though the leader of the terrorist organization involved in the Big Shell incident claimed to be Solid Snake, it was actually one of his brothers, Solidus.
You remember me, don't you? You've grown. Only a few more steps to outer heaven.
Solidus and Raiden had a long history, though during Sons of Liberty, Raiden initially forgot about it. Solidus murdered Jack's biological parents, trained the boy back in the early 1980s, and gave him the nickname the Ripper because of Raiden's merciless talent for killing. Their relationship very closely mimicked that of Solid Snake and Big Boss, thus he was selected for the simulation. Jack's girlfriend Rosemary was also an agent of the Patriots, and she was sent to spy on Jack and disclose personal details about his life. However, Rose became torn between her duty and her love for Jack, especially after she learned she was pregnant with his child. The two were reunited after Raiden killed Solidus in New York and got engaged. However, the two parted ways before getting married. Another character forced to deal with his past during Big Shell was Hal Emmerich. Hal and his stepsister Emma grew up together until their father drowned, giving Emma a phobia of water. She believed Hal left shortly after solely due to grief, but Otacon later revealed he had an affair with his stepmother and wanted to break free. Emma, like the rest of her family, got into science and became the primary creator of GW, the AI system powering Arsenal gear named after our first president, George Washington.
Sorry to bring this up during the mission, but I just can't leave this thing up to you any longer. Infiltrate the enemy fortress. I need scissors. Rescue 61.
GW was the true force behind the real S3 project, Selection for Societal Sanity, a means to filter information to ensure the Patriots' continued dominance. After the events of Sons of Liberty concluded, Otacon informed Snake that the data obtained about the members of the Patriots' Wise Men's Council revealed all 12 members had died already, over 100 years ago. This raised a huge problem for the duo, though it's more than likely that the data found was about the founding members of the Philosophers, whom had all died off by the 1930s. But this is by no means the final answer. In the immediate years following Sons of Liberty, worldwide conditions created a high demand for mercenaries. Liquid, who appeared to have complete control of Revolver Ocelot's mind and body, took advantage of this military boom and re-established Outer Heaven to be an overseer of the 5 biggest private military companies. He called the new organization Outer Haven. In 2014, Liquid Ocelot prepared to use his new power in a standoff against the might of the Patriots. The only real truth that remains constant in the Metal Gear franchise is that we'll never really know the real truth. Billions of dollars have been spent and millions of lives have been lost in pursuit of the actual architects responsible for the world's most notorious conflicts. The journey of Big Boss and his sons has been one of elaborate events woven into the fabric of real history, and Metal Gear speaks more honestly about America's role as a global superpower than most acts of fiction.
2008, Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots definitively concluded the story of Solid Snake, a hero first unveiled in 1987 who went on to become one of the most celebrated characters in video games. Despite one chapter being complete, a driving force of Metal Gear and the genetic father of Snake, Big Boss, left behind many unanswered questions. His beginnings are unveiled in Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, but the founding of Outer Heaven, one of the most important locations in the series, and Big Boss's transformation into a villain, had not yet been covered. In 2010, the tale of Big Boss continued, not on current generation consoles, but instead on a handheld, the PlayStation Portable. Peace Walker did not start as a Kojima game. The father of Metal Gear intended to just lay out the overall concepts and guidelines, and then let the rest of the development team take the reins. Yet as the themes of Peace Walker started coming together, such as nuclear deterrence and the Cold War, Kojima worried it may be too confusing and alienating to a younger audience, the target demographic. As a result, Kojima became more involved, serving as director, producer, and writer, in an effort to keep the narrative as clear as possible. He wasn't quite ready to hand the series off. The young target audience was also the reason yellow is such a dominant color in the game. Konami wanted Peace Walker to have more of a pop feel to it that appealed to school-age kids. While it's not entirely clear why Konami was so interested in getting the attention of a younger crowd, it's possible that the success of the Monster Hunter franchise was an influence.
A talking cat!
During Peace Walker's development, Monster Hunter was a national sensation in Japan, with 2008's Monster Hunter Freedom Unite eventually selling 3.7 million units. Since Peace Walker first released on the PSP, one of the most popular ways to play Monster Hunter at the time, it's likely that Konami wanted to capture the same audience. The idea is given further credence by Konami's collaboration with Capcom for Peace Walker. In the game, players can unlock special missions where they face off with bosses from Monster Hunter, including one named Gear Rex, also known as Nuclear Dragon. In an interview with Famitsu, a popular Japanese video game magazine, Kojima candidly stated that Peace Walker wasn't as visually impressive as his past games, but that wasn't the point. Kojima said that you had to play Peace Walker in order to get it, referring to the various new systems and how they play off one another. Perhaps the most surprising information from the interview is an unexpected point of inspiration. At the time, Kojima's son was fascinated with Pokemon Gold and Silver, and his father didn't understand why until he got his hands on them. Kojima loved them so much that he ended up playing through them twice. He went as far as to say he was addicted. In Pokemon Gold and Silver, after you play through the main area of the game Johto, you gain access to a completely redone version of Kanto from Pokemon Red and Blue, the two preceding games. Peace Walker also features vital story sequences after the credits for players who fulfill specific requirements. At the time of Peace Walker's release, it was the most involved post-credit content in a Metal Gear game, and it was seemingly inspired by Kojima's experience with Pokemon.
Something tells me you're no ordinary entomologist.
I've been waiting, Snake.
The age of heroes is over, buried alongside the boss and her bankrupt beliefs.
While Peace Walker gives the player a lot to do, the story is undoubtedly one of the game's biggest draws. It begins after the events of Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater and Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops. Snake Eater is an especially vital part of Big Boss's story because it details his relationship with the Boss, a legendary soldier and his former mentor. The Boss remains true to her country despite being used by the United States government and having her reputation permanently tarnished. Disgusted by what happened to the Boss, Snake decides to create the MSF, also known as Soldiers Without Borders. The idea of the group is that it exists without government influence, preventing soldiers from being disgraced like the Boss. Free from ideology, the group can fight wherever and whenever needed. Big Boss, along with second-in-command Kazuhira Miller, establishes a ragtag base of operations along the coast of Colombia. And it's here where the story of Peace Walker begins.
No offense, but I don't know what peace is. Never felt what it's like. Never even been interested in it.
Big Boss and Kaz are visited by Ramon Galvez, a KGB agent, and Paz Ortega, a young student whose only desire is peace. Galvez wants to hire MSF to uncover the CIA's suspicious activities in Costa Rica and drive them out of the region. Big Boss is resistant until Galvez plays him a tape recorded by Paz's captured friend. On the tape, the voice of the boss is clearly heard, even though she's been dead for a decade.
It will bite you unless you kill it. Go home.
Boss. It causes a rush of emotions in Big Boss, who hurriedly agrees to the job after Galvez threatens to burn the tape. Big Boss claims he accepts on behalf of Paz and her dreams of peace, but it's really because he wants to know the source of the voice. The boss did not rise from the dead. Instead, an AI called MammalPod was constructed in her image with a voice that's eerily similar. MammalPod partly controls a quadrupedal nuclear weapon known as Peace Walker, envisioned by Hot Coldman, the CIA station chief of Central America, as the perfect nuclear deterrent. According to Coldman, humans are incapable of retaliation after a nuclear strike, unable to cope with the fact that they'd be responsible for killing hundreds of thousands of innocent lives. Because of this, an AI-controlled deterrent is necessary for peace since it won't hesitate, coldly collecting data and striking when needed. What better mind to control Peace Walker than the boss, a perfect soldier who stayed true to her mission no matter what. To prove Peace Walker's capabilities, Coldman insists on launching a nuke, demonstrating the weapon's power to the world.
A new age is dawning. An age in which Peace Walker, an infallible nuclear deterrent system, will play a vital role.
One of Peace Walker's biggest successes from a narrative standpoint is the growth of Big Boss as a character. Despite his growling disposition when dealing with others, Big Boss crumbles when he encounters the AI version of his former mentor. He completely loses composure, screaming at the machine. Everything Snake thinks he knows about the woman who changed his life may be a lie, causing him to panic.
Why did she take that mission? How did she feel about dying? Why was I chosen?
You want to know the truth?
The game shows Big Boss in an intimate way, presenting his vulnerabilities openly, despite his iconic status as a hero and eventual villain. Peace Walker doesn't just follow Metal Gear Solid 3, it shows the audience the lasting effects of that game's events, and how they played a crucial role in further developments. While Peace Walker contains its own ideas, it's very concerned about untangling the emotional aftermath of MGS3 in a fulfilling way.
The missing link between infantry and artillery. Metal Gear. Metal Gear.
The boss's death affects not only Big Boss, but others as well, including a new character named Dr. Strangelove. The female scientist idolizes the boss so much that she agrees to develop the MammalPod AI in an attempt to resurrect her, even though it will directly lead to a nuclear attack. Strangelove shows the danger of pursuing something at the cost of everything else, a classic Metal Gear theme, and one that rests at the very core of Big Boss's character. During his journey, Big Boss encounters many who have been betrayed. Among them are Amanda and Chico, part of a guerrilla group run out of Nicaragua by a ruthless regime. The group struggles to hold itself together, especially after the death of their leader, but Big Boss gives them a home through MSF and a renewed spirit. Throughout the history of Metal Gear, players are told of the founding of Outer Heaven, but in Peace Walker, we actually get to see Big Boss's ability to galvanize an independent army.
Fulton recovery subject confirmed onboard helicopter.
Peace Walker doesn't just talk about the blossoming military organization of Big Boss. It lets players build it for themselves. During missions, Big Boss can extract knocked out soldiers, bringing them back to base and assigning them to a specific area. Each of these areas is critical and helps Big Boss in the field. The only way to acquire new weapons, for instance, is to research them, which takes time and spends a currency known as GMP, or Gross Military Product. GMP isn't free. The currency is accumulated through the combat unit, and the stronger the soldier assigned to the unit, the more GMP earned. Even in the best of circumstances, GMP is extremely limited, and development costs are high, leading to difficult decisions where you have to prioritize the development of one weapon or item at the cost of something else. R&D, or the combat unit, cannot function without food, forcing you to ensure the mess hall team is well staffed. Create an excess of food, and soldiers will perform better than normal, leading to things like faster research times. But a lack of food has the opposite effect.
We're under attack!
All of these different aspects are connected, with each relying on the other. Never before had a Metal Gear game offered such an overwhelming amount of choice, nor demanded such a constant commitment. Not only were players responsible for choosing what to bring into battle and how to use it, but also what items they had access to and what they were willing to put at risk to create them. For example, you can send members of the combat unit on special missions, and if successful, they'll return with blueprints for items and a significant amount of GMP. There's also a very real possibility of them getting killed during these missions, meaning you could lose access to valuable staff. The new systems not only apply to the development of your base, but also affect minute-to-minute gameplay during missions. It's imperative to extract knocked-out soldiers, but doing so puts you at greater risk of being discovered. Players are also restricted with how many soldiers they can bring back to base, since the Fulton recovery devices, special balloons that instantly transport people, are limited in quantity. Before Peace Walker, Metal Gear was largely about traveling along a linear path toward a single objective, preferably through the use of stealth. Though that's also true in Peace Walker, there's so much more to think about at any given moment, since even the smallest decisions impact something else. Freedom of choice carries over into the boss battles. While it's possible to simply destroy the armored vehicles, tanks, and helicopters thrown your way, you can take the more difficult route of killing the pilots, preserving the vehicles for later use in deployment missions. The various mechs you face off against also offer rewards depending on how you fight them. Damaging different sections of the mech unlocks salvaged parts that players can acquire after the fight, which go toward the development of your own Metal Gear, Zeke. Completing Zeke is necessary for those who want to continue the story after the credits. Although Metal Gear is predominantly known for its single-player, Peace Walker features robust multiplayer components. 2 players can sneak together through the main missions, while up to 4 players can participate in the numerous boss battles. Missions are designed in such a way to give an edge to those who choose to play together, such as having shortcuts only accessible with the help of someone else. Additionally, there are actions that can only be done with a friend, including Snake In, where 2 players hold each other, one guides and the other shoots. There's also the Love Box that allows a duo to hide in a single cardboard box. Players who want a more competitive experience can participate in Versus Ops with up to 6 players. Peace Walker launched on June 8, 2010 to widespread critical acclaim. Several outlets stated the game acts as an excellent amalgamation of the series' best aspects, praising the story and base management sections especially. Common criticisms cited that the complex MGS3-style gameplay didn't fit well in a handheld, and that the environments were too small. A year later, on November 8th, the Metal Gear Solid HD Collection was released, containing updated versions of Metal Gear Solid 2, 3, and Peace Walker. The new version of Peace Walker made use of the right stick on 360 and PS3, and also added rumble support. In Japan, Peace Walker sold over 570,000 copies during its first 2 weeks. Despite internal hopes that Peace Walker would be an international hit, sales were very poor outside of Japan, failing to chart in most countries. According to Kojima, weak sales of Peace Walker are what caused Kazuhira Miller to be removed from the international versions of Ground Zeroes. Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker is not only a worthy addition, it revolutionizes with ambitious new systems that serve as the blueprint for following games. It further establishes the mythos of Big Boss, while also re-examining crucial moments from Metal Gear Solid 3. Peace Walker demonstrably shows that Hideo Kojima can create something enthralling, regardless of platform. Kojima and Konami are currently celebrating the release of The Phantom Pain. The game launched on September 1st to rave reviews, yet it wouldn't have been possible without Peace Walker, which introduced so many of the core concepts expanded upon in Phantom Pain. Despite initially coming out on a portable system, Peace Walker was given the same respect and effort as any other game in the series, with Kojima even referring to it as the Metal Gear Solid 5 I have in my heart before release. Other franchises have tried adapting themselves to smaller devices, but few have done it with such ambition and grace.